All right, a very good morning to you. Welcome along to Tuesday. It's a short week here on Off the Ball AM, made all the better by the return of Uncle Travelling Matt. How are you doing?
Very well. How are you?
Yeah, very well.
Any crack?
Well, a lot of crack happens. You missed 3 of the busiest sporting weeks of the year.
So I've heard. All that GAA, all those club games you covered over the past couple of weeks, I heard they went down a treat.
Well, there wasn't a whole heap of GAA stories. Now, in fairness, you've called that one right. There was a lot of bitching and whining and moaning. You took the best month of the year away for that. But Arsene Wenger stepped down as the Arsenal manager.
I know. I couldn't believe it. I got like a push notification at like 4 a.m. one morning and I was like, this can't be real.
Still up, of course.
I must be hallucinating here or something, that I've got a push notification saying Arsene Wenger has decided to leave Arsenal. And it just kind of hit home as soon as I flew home at the weekend, and just, I'm not going to lie, there was a hint of a tear in my eye at one stage with all these memories that we've got with the guy.
You were tired and emotional.
Very tired, very emotional. Still am very tired, still am very emotional. But like, just on that point, I mean, I'm sure it's been made here over the past couple of weeks, is that you can equally want Arsene Wenger to leave the club and also appreciate everything he's done for the club, and still feel very, very sad about the fact that he's left Arsenal Football Club. I mean, I don't know why, it was just one of the first things that kind of came to my mind on Sunday when this kind of big speech was happening at the Emirates after they hammered Burnley. Like, just watching him as a kid, obviously I'm an Arsenal fan, I was brought up as an Arsenal fan by my dad, and whenever I used to be a kid, my dad, like, I can remember from being a very, very small age, he used to be at the pub with his mates and he'd point to the screen and he's like, who's that on screen? When Arsene Wenger would be on screen, and I'm like, that man is God. And that was like his party piece when he was in the pub with his mates. And, you know, obviously I was brought up as a staunch Catholic, but other than that, Arsene Wenger was...
How old were you?
You're talking 5, 6 years old at this point. I kind of grew out of it when I got to 8 or 9. To be honest with you,
and then grew back into it recently enough.
Yeah, well, like come the Invincibles year, I actually genuinely believed that God and Arsene Wenger were the one person. So, which might yet be true. I don't know. We'll find out at a later date.
So you were in Boston, you were in New York. Where else were you?
I was in Chicago as well.
Okay, yeah. So you saw a lot of sports?
I saw a lot of sport, actually, yeah. It's very early baseball season at the moment. It's very easy to get tickets. Like, you can pick up a baseball ticket for £7 at the moment if you wanted to. But yeah, so in terms of baseball, we were at the Yankees in my first week there. Absolutely freezing. Do not go unless it is going to be good weather, because it's actually a relatively painful experience sitting outside in the really tough East Coast wind early in the season. But come Chicago, we were at Wrigley Field, and like the temperature was like 35 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day. So it was just a beautiful sunset, beautiful evening, good win for the Cubs as well that day against against Colorado. I was going to say Miami, but no, it was
some
Yankees
major sports
Miami.
franchise, or not so.
Yeah, exactly. From my recollection, it was indeed Colorado, and it was just a great atmosphere. But when it comes to sport in the US right now, there is nothing like this at the Garden. It is an unbelievable sporting cauldron. It's not the most original. I'm sure there's plenty of people watching who've been to the Garden or to the TD Garden for a playoffs game. It is absolutely electric. It is one of the best sporting atmospheres I've ever witnessed.
So completely full, obviously. That's early before it fills up. And how much were the tickets for that?
Tickets for that were like €90.
All right.
Yeah, bought well in advance, and we were literally at the wall was behind us.
Right, okay.
At the very, very back. Yeah. But it's kind of like Croke Park, no such thing as a bad seat in the TD Garden, as the old saying goes. A lot of people enjoying themselves at the
As in everybody pissed.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why that is. I guess because there's so many pubs in proximity that people show up and it seems like they've been drinking all day. Like, there was one guy sitting beside us, and the classic American phrase of "let's go," he kept roaring it for the whole thing until halftime, when Levels by
Celtics.
Yeah, exactly. Until halftime, when Levels by Avicii came on, and this guy stood up and was like, "R.I.P. Avicii," and kept shouting it over and over again, to the point where "R.I.P. Avicii" became the new "let's go" for the Boston Celtics for the evening. So a bit of a strange one there. I think we were kind of just in the back seats, where people who just kind of like to go and enjoy themselves.
Celtics won.
They did. They won that game. Yeah, that was a game 5. They got through against Milwaukee. They're probably going to get through to the conference finals now at this point, against what will definitely be the Cavs.
Yeah.
Which has turned into it's actually turned into a pretty incredible playoff series at this point. I don't think anybody a month ago would have given you great odds on, or they would have given you very good odds actually, on Celtics and Cavs absolutely coasting through to the conference finals.
Oh, and try and sneak in some LeBron chat. Hashtag OTB AM.
Gladly. Like, the conversation is real now, as it seems to have developed over the past couple of weeks, that we can have this conversation about LeBron James and Michael Jordan, and actually you can be taken seriously if you put forward the idea that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time.
More buzzer beaters now than Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant and somebody else combined.
Is that true?
I think in playoff games. There was definitely one of those stats doing the rounds. And then I just woke up this morning early and saw Skip Bayless giving out about him doing something that was a complete fluke, but then eventually tweeting to the point where he's like, yeah, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
When even Skip Bayless is saying that something LeBron has done isn't bad, then you realise that, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Skip Bayless, but he's kind of like Eamon Dunphy, except on this giant, long, fever dream LSD trip. That's kind of how I would characterise
presumably with
Bayless.
a team of people behind him trying to kind of further his idea. Like literally 2 teams represented by 2 different people is what that show is. But he's wrong on a lot of things he was trying to say. I'm not sure what he's referring to in a fluke here. But
something happened last night where then I just went to check to see if I could see like the one bit of highlights, but it turned out he'd scored like 28 points or something ridiculous.
29 points last night, yeah. I've had to wean myself actually off watching the matches at this point, so I'm going to come in here very cold on LeBron. But I think everybody saw on Saturday night that the buzzer beater, which was off the backboard, it was an unbelievable kind of movement of parts where you just knew exactly what was going to happen.
Maybe he was saying that was a fluke, actually. He was like, rather than drive to the basket and just take the foul and get the free throws, that going for that shot was a fluke. And so actually he choked by taking on the more difficult shot because he's no good at free throws. That might have been the thing. And
that makes perfect sense.
Maybe somebody was just retweeting it into my timeline this morning and I was like, what? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, coming up a little bit later on, we're going to be talking a bit about Alex Ferguson, obviously, and we'll also talk about the relegation playoff game tonight, which is effectively another £60 million match between Swansea and Southampton, although there is still an outside sequence of events in which both of them will end up being safe, but very unlikely. We'll also talk with Willie Hegarty, who was live and in full glorious Technicolor on the internet from New York as New York and Leitrim duked it out. Match finished a draw in normal time, which means that no bets were winners, right? That's the winning one for the bookies. And then obviously we mentioned this because Johnny Ward said he had a big enough bet on New York to end up having to go to see the match.
And what were the odds on New York come to the end? I knew they were evens a couple of weeks ago. Did they maintain that price?
No, they've gone back out. They've gone back out to 11-8, 6-4. So they came in and they went back out again. But so I mean, if you had them. If you were on the right side of a point spread, you were grand with the draw, but otherwise you were a bit screwed. And then Leitrim managed to dig it out. So let's briefly run through the papers here. We'll come back to these in a few more details a little bit later.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
Okay, so loads of interesting stuff in the newspapers, quite varied today. In terms of the order that I'm going to go with, first we should start with the Irish Independent. I'll start with the Irish Independent here. Offaly rule denies Rising Star senior spot. Now, this is I mean, in fairness, a great story, but also really interesting in terms of how counties are looking after their players. So Cian Johnson has been an absolute hotshot for Offaly, played the O'Byrne Cup, played in the league, but is actually going to play in the underage championship for Offaly rather than the senior championship. This is not something that Kerry, for example, are doing. Clifford's going to play in the senior championship. He's going to play with the senior team. He's making the point that he wants to play. He is ready for it, and who knows if he's going to still be living in Ireland, if he's going to have injury or form. But the county board are saying, no, you're underage. You've got to stick with your underage team. Most counties aren't this far-sighted. Most counties don't actually look after the short-term welfare of the players. They're like, get out there.
Mm-hmm. And that's the way you would expect it to happen in a club or in a county like Kerry or like Dublin. For Offaly to have this farsightedness is actually impressively surprising. I didn't actually see this coming at all. I thought for sure this guy has been arguably their best player in the National League. He should therefore step right up and just play inter-county football. It will have a hugely positive impact on him in terms of avoiding injuries, in terms of being good to go for next year when they'll get an even better senior player. But as you say, the drawbacks are is if he doesn't get this kind of bite of the cherry of the glamour of inter-county senior football, he might just, look a little bit more further field and say, I'm going on a J1 next summer.
Could do, absolutely could do. And so it's Offaly definitely treading a fine line there. Another interesting story from Colin Keys there. Dub's French visit may not come under camp spotlight. So that's the headline on the PDF that we got last night, and it got changed. Dublin's Somme visit adds to training camp confusion. So the Dubs went to the Somme. They were at the Ulster Tower on Saturday, a famous war landmark that stands in memory of Ulster soldiers who died fighting for the British Army in World War I.
Right.
Not your average GAA team's pre-championship trip. So they're not sure. The confusion is whether or not it represents, would you categorise this as a training session, a training camp? Did they go to the fields of the Somme to see, history and kind of be motivated, or did they go for collective training?
Well, the motivation could be a form of collective training, right? I mean,
it is. You're training the mind.
Like, I was just thinking about this, like reading a couple of the Dubs interviews at the weekend. Like, what is the thing that is motivating them now at this point? Because let's face it, they don't really care about this whole idea of let's be the second or the third team in history to do 4 in a row and then subsequently do 5 in a row. I genuinely don't think that that's a big thing for them until next year, until the 5 is potentially on the table. So now it's like, what is the real motivation going to be? And you've got this genius in Jim Gavin who's like, do you know what? Let's go to one of the biggest battlefields in Europe and let's show them what a real battlefield is like. And potentially, is the end goal to lessen the pressure on them, or is it to increase the sort of motivation and say, you guys have had it tough in pre-season training, but look how tough these guys had it. I don't know what the end game is here, but I would certainly say motivation is a form of training.
It's pretty unique, right? I haven't heard of this type of stuff before. This is the modern day version of the hill that the Clare hurlers had to run up. This is like Jim Gavin. Fair play. And so if it has been found that that's collective training, then, or that was a training camp abroad, then they'll lose home venue for a game next year. So there's no game in Croker. I don't think that's going to happen. No. I think whatever happens, they're going to be getting those games in Croker. Anyway, okay, so on to the Times Ireland edition. Lancaster, I'm staying at Leinster. Great news from Leinster perspective, given how successful Stuart Lancaster has been as part of the coaching ticket there. And Rochford says location hurts Mayo hopes. Is that story that we covered a bit on the show last year when you start to look at the amount of... so the figures come out every year for how much money it costs to run the inter-county teams, and Mayo are always way up the top. And primarily that's because their travel costs are absolutely huge. Now they're renting pitches in the Midlands to try and make sure that the venue is like halfway between Mayo and Dublin. 40% I think of the team was the figure. 40% of the squad are based in Dublin. They're not getting home till 12:30, 1:30. I did a league game down in Mayo last year, and like by the time you get home, and I hadn't obviously played the match, but by the time you're getting home it is late, you are absolutely wrecked, and that was like a one-off. But if you're doing that for 4 or 5 months in the darkness, at least when the weather's a little bit better and you're getting up early and you're getting home late, the weather's decent and you feel okay about life. But when there's all that travel involved, so definitely I think that's a big thing. That's the only paper that has the Lancaster I'm staying angle, because he's obviously linked with Harlequins in its own slot there, chief rugby correspondent writing that, so you can be guaranteed that that's in the UK version of the Times as well. Most of the other Lancaster stories are about the comments yesterday with regards to Joey Carbery, which I guess we're going to get to in the Irish Times. So here you go. Lancaster would like Carbery to stay tangled up in blue. Very calm and reasoned comments from Stuart Lancaster, where he talks for about 10 minutes and then eventually gets to the point, well, actually, I think he probably should say. But that's the first line that everybody picks out, naturally enough, because here's a former international coach saying, we want to keep one of our best players as opposed to shipping him off to the north. Yeah,
I think this is kind of case closed at this point. He's been in the studio himself, Carbery, and said he wants to stay at Leinster. Stuart Lancaster says he wants to keep him at Leinster. I think this is that book closed right shut there.
Something happened in between.
Yeah?
Joe Schmidt had a meeting with Joey Carbery.
Okay, I've missed this.
Said, it's room for a 10 up there. What do you think?
And do we know the outcome of this meeting?
It's being considered. I mean, it's being considered in the week before the Champions Cup final. The first time this conversation happened was the week before the Champions Cup quarter-final, and it's rumbled on for 2 months. So you've got to say the handling of this from the IRFU has not been great if you are involved with Leinster or if you're involved with Joey Carbery. It's like literally the most important stage of the season, and you're having your head turned by a request to up sticks and move to Belfast, where when they were asking you to do this, they didn't even have a coach in place. Now they've got a coach in place who they're not quite sure is actually going to be in place for the start of the season or not. That still has to be negotiated. So not the best handling from an IRFU perspective.
Well, if you're looking at it, if you're going to play hardball at any point, now's the time when the IRFU are like, we have to play our best hand right now. We've just won the Grand Slam. We're viewed as one of the best countries in the world. The IRFU policy is being glorified left, right and centre. Now's the time where we've got to do what we think is best for the national team. And if, like, fair enough, I might disagree with it, but if they genuinely believe that Carbery going and getting full game time at 10 for Ulster next season is the best way forward, then by absolute means, like, go ahead and do it.
Maybe wait until after the Champions Cup's over?
Well, there's also that timing issue, yeah, which would be a fair
if you're just going to do it anyway, right?
Yeah, true.
Leinster's Tom Brady is the... apparently Lancaster has been sending clips of Tom Brady to Johnny Sexton saying he's going to go on till he's like in his mid-40s. You could do the same.
Potentially. Given how grueling the rugby season is in comparison to the NFL season, that might be one difference in the two things right there.
You met one of Tom Brady's linemen.
Oh yes, I did. Donta Hightower. Shout out to Donta, good morning to you. I'm sure he's watching this morning. I met him after the Celtics game in a pub called The Harp, and he was there, and I was like, Donta, how's it going? Gave me a fist pump, and I was like, can I get a picture? And he's like, I'm going to go to the bathroom and we'll get a picture after that. Next thing I look out the window and I just see Donta Hightower walking across the road and leaving the bar. Just by being in that proximity to them, there was a couple of other Patriots there. David Andrews and Marcus Cannon were also in the proximity. People literally came up to us because it looked like we were in the entourage and said straight to our faces, "Are you famous?" And then if you said no, they're like, "Well, screw you."
Yeah.
Other people said yes.
OTB AM.
Other
people.
I forgot about that. I forgot about my very profession there. But they literally have no interest in you if you're around a Patriot and you're not famous, basically. So in future, say yes.
Nah, man, I'm an agent.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a physiotherapist or something, but I don't know why I thought physiotherapist would be what is something I look like. An agent would have been a good shout.
There you go. Come on.
Next
what have
time.
you got?
We'll start with the Irish Daily Mail. On my front, they're leading with rugby. They've also got a couple of GAA stories. Don't Go Joey reads the headline. Lancaster still hopes Carbery will stay a blue, while Mayo's Rochford piles pressure on Galway to build up to one of the biggest championship games I can remember in May anyway, has begun today in earnest, and it's going to roll on over the next couple of days. We'll be previewing it later in the week. We'll move on to the Heralds. They lead with football this morning. Lovren says, "We can do it." Pool defender aiming to wrap up Euro qualification. Dubs will have to hold Reid as well. Dublin must try and silence the top hurler of this decade, and TJ Reid when their Leinster SHC campaign opens against Kilkenny on Sunday. That's the opening paragraph of that story. It's Anthony Cunningham who was speaking to the media in the last couple of days. Let's have a look at the back page of the Irish Daily Mirror this morning. Let's win the cup for Sir Alex. Juan Mata, we've been overwhelmed by the sad news about the incomparable Fergie and must win a trophy to dedicate to him. You've also got Juve's Allegri is interested in taking the Gunners' job. There seems to be mixed reports here about Massimiliano Allegri and whether or not he'd be happy to work under the current structures at Arsenal, but Juventus' structures aren't that dissimilar to Arsenal, so that'll be an interesting one to see how it develops. It looks like he is going to be the front runner, although there is a couple of other ones, like on the back of the Irish Daily Star. Carlo is Gunners' backstop, says David Woods' story here. If Arsenal can't get Allegri, the Star are reporting this morning that Carlo Ancelotti will be the man in the hot seat. But one of his aims will be to actually nurture a new boss like a Mikel Arteta or a Patrick Vieira to then become the next manager. So essentially a stopgap.
That always works, right? A lame duck manager with the next guy working away in your background going, nah, I wouldn't have done that.
In fairness.
Carlo. I don't agree with that, Carlo.
Carlo Ancelotti is the best stopgap boss in the world. He's done it for a living for Chelsea, what is it, twice, three times? I mean, it's worked out quite well both times he did it.
I mean, the first time he wasn't actually a stopgap. He was like, I've got this job for, look, I'm Carlo Ancelotti. I'm like a Champions League winning manager. I'm like a genius.
Yeah.
Isn't that what?
Is that what happened?
Gus Hiddink is the guy you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's probably it actually. Yeah, it's
No.
good. No, Carlo Ancelotti did it for like a stopgap for a little while as well. Gus Hiddink obviously
Yeah, but Ancelotti got the
another
job full on properly. Like, he was like, I'm Carlo. Hear me roar.
Well, if Carlo goes full Carlo at Arsenal, I think Arsenal are going to be very, very successful. But if he's there as a stopgap to kind of nurture Mikel Arteta or Patrick Vieira, can't see that being too profitable. Also, on the back of the Irish Daily Star this morning, their lead is one title and Celts will fold. Dave King, who's over as the chairman at Rangers, has said that Rangers just need one title and Celtic will kind of go back to being second best in Scotland, or at least there will be a good title race every single year, which he's right in saying.
No, he's not.
If they win one title, winning one title...
They win one title what?
Then there will suddenly be...
Celtic will fold.
Well, Celtic will fold. That part is nonsense. But that is the headline where he actually says that. He kind of like talks about the huge gap between Celtic and Rangers and how it's actually not that big, that Hibs and Aberdeen are actually punching way above their weight at the moment, and that the gap isn't actually as big as it should be. The part about Celtic folding, I think that's way down in the comments there. It's not actually something he was leading with.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't read too much into that. The back of the Sun then is Mesut Ozil, sick of O's ill. Arsenal stars fed up with Mesut injuries, claims he is picking and choosing games. Martin Keown is quoted in that story as well this morning, kind of giving out about Ozil, saying that that back injury is one of those ones that is very, very hard to verify. You can't actually go on and say, listen, here is my evidence that I actually have a back injury, and that they're suggesting that he may or may not actually have a back injury. And then finally, the back of The Guardian leads with this Donald McRae interview, Eamon McGee being interviewed. It's a brilliant piece. I've had a beautiful life, reads the headline. We might read a couple of quotes out later on in the programme, but from what I've read so far, it's a fantastic piece. And he kind of starts by chatting to McRae with a can of Carling in his hand at 11 a.m. in the morning. He's got scars on his hand. It hurts him to actually pick up the can of Carling because he's been in a bar fight the night before. He's a man with a target on his head for sure. It's a fascinating piece.
Yeah, very not that complicated a character. A bad person in many respects. There's a new book out about Eamon McGee, and definitely be conflicted about whether or not you want to bring any more of his story to light. Anyway, we'll talk about that again at some point because we've got to move on. Going to speak with Daniel Harris in just a minute about tonight's relegation playoff, effectively between Swansea and Southampton. But obviously, we'll talk about Alex Ferguson as well. Here's Brian Kerr speaking with Nathan after OTB's live commentary game. Chelsea won, Liverpool 0 on Sunday. Here he is in his own experience of dealing with Alex Ferguson over the years.
I had dealings going back to when I was manager on Patsy. I remember speaking to him about trying to get a loan of a player, a lad called Derek Brazil at one time, who was a youth player who played on our youth teams under Liam Toohey. And I called Old Trafford, and I didn't get him immediately, but I was working in the lab in the science in ag science at the time in UCD, and I got a call back. The lad that worked with me, Declan O'Donnell, unfortunately passed away last week, but Declan came down to where I was actually working and said, look, there's a bloke on the phone, he says he's Alex Ferguson, but I'm not having, and he looked at me as if to say, I said, well, it might be, you know. So we did, and in fairness to him, he checked it out. He came back to me, he said, look, he's a hamstring injury. I said, the last thing I need is a player with a hamstring injury. I've got 4 of them already, 4 centre-halves, including Pat Tolan was one of them at the time, Johnny McDonald. But anyway, I had dealings with him after as manager of Ireland. I have to say, you know, once we had that initial discussion about Roy's availability and so on, it was easy for me to work with him. I think there was certainly respect on my part. I think he respected my job and the way I was trying to do it, and tried to understand the pressure he was under to. In that one particular season, they were out of the running in the league, and it was probably the season 2004, and they were chasing the cup at that stage. It was coming towards the cup semi-final, and I had to do a little bit of cooperation with him in terms of not selecting the players, John O'Shea and I think it was John Roy and maybe even Liam Miller at that time, Lord rest him. And you know, I said, look, I won't pick them for it was a friendly game, and we got on fine. I found him very cooperative and understanding of the job I was trying to do.
It's Brian Kerr speaking in the aftermath of the commentary game where Chelsea beat Liverpool at the weekend with Nathan. Now, Daniel Harris is on the line. Good morning to you, Daniel. How you doing?
Morning, hiya.
Yeah, so we should talk about Alex Ferguson first. Obviously, the outpouring of warmth and support is really nothing less than you would expect for a figure as important as Alex Ferguson, given what he is currently undergoing at the moment. It's always very hard for people to kind of find the right tone in circumstances like this, because nobody really wants to believe exactly what is happening.
No, I know, but it's one of those things, because the thing about Fergie is it's not simply that he did lots of good things in football, but there's an inordinate amount of love for him from all sorts of different people, because I mean, what Brian was talking about, for example, about the various players who played for him, and the thing about Fergie was that he didn't just take pride in the great players that he had, but he took just as much pride in players who weren't good enough to make the grade at United, who went off elsewhere and played for other teams and did well there, or just grew into what he considered to be good men, and he had taught them some of the ways of doing that, because in the end, like, he was a football man, but what was his real genius was his genius for people. And I think that's why people warmed to him so much. Even people who didn't like him respected that about him. Yeah,
I think, you know, we also probably forget that when Brian Kerr is talking about a centre-half that's on the books at Manchester United, Alex Ferguson would have probably at some stage along the line scouted him himself, and certainly would have had conversations about this individual as somebody that he wanted to know about to make sure that he was worth having at the club. So that's the point you're talking about, really, that everybody who passed through Old Trafford for a very long period of time were on his radar in some way.
Yeah, that's that. And a lot of them came when they were young, so they'd known their parents, and so he'd have worked out that individual and thought about that individual. How do I get the best from this individual? How do I get the best for that individual if they're not for me? Because in the end, he understood that talent isn't democratic. But you still have to look after the people who, for whatever reason, just don't have that talent. And I think he also understood, and this is really important, this is really why he had so much success, is that he understood that football is simple, and a lot of people don't even get that far. And he also understood that people are complicated, understands that people are complicated. And being able to match those two things is the best way of getting the most out of human beings who play football. And not everyone is able to do that. We see people who are able to relate to certain characters, like Jose Mourinho, I guess, is the most obvious comparator. He's very good at getting the best out of maniacs. He's less good at getting the best out of introverts. For Fergie, that wasn't the case. He melded a team of all sorts of different people from all sorts of different cultures with all sorts of different characters and backgrounds, and he got the best out of them again and again and again. And no one in the history of football has been able to refresh teams in the same way. And if you look at football as this finite thing, you have to kick the round thing into the rectangular thing. That's not going to change, but characters do change, and the culture of society also changes.
Yeah, like it's interesting that you bring up Jose there, because it is interesting timing when we have this conversation. And in terms of respect, as you also mentioned there a few moments ago, it seems that respect was hugely born out of the fact that whatever happened in the dressing room stayed in the dressing room with regards to the hairdryer treatment, etc., etc. But when he got out of the dressing room, when Alex Ferguson faced the media, he would defend you to the nth degree, whereas we don't always see that currently in the current regime at Manchester United. Like, that's surely a huge factor in the respect that Alex Ferguson has.
I guess I feel bad kind of using what's happened to Fergie as a stick with which to beat Mourinho, but I think that there's a slight distinction between what we're saying here, is that I think Fergie often did lay into his players in the press if he thought they really deserved it, but I think the difference with Fergie was he didn't bear grudges. So if you had words with him, then he would go home and he'd come back the next day, and generally that would be the end of it. Whereas with Mourinho, you feel like if someone annoyed him 3 years ago, he's still trying to find a way of getting back at them, and that even counts for his own players. So the players that he takes a dislike to, it seems like it's very hard for them to convince him otherwise. He didn't like Anthony Martial in the first place, and whatever he's done, he still doesn't like him. And whereas he likes Nemanja Matic, he likes Lukaku, and he talked after the Brighton game. Lukaku's a good example. You always say to me, why Lukaku, why Lukaku, why Lukaku? What you saw tonight is because why it's always Lukaku. Now, I look at that and I think Lukaku didn't score for about 10 games over in the winter, and he wasn't playing well either. So that's not really fair on him or on someone like Marcus Rashford or Martial, who's come in having not started the game since whoever knows when. But he likes Lukaku, and he likes Matic, and he likes their focus, and he likes the way they go about things. So they're given their excused poor performances in a way that players like someone like Anthony Martial, whose personality probably doesn't chime quite with Mourinho's, he has to have a bad half and you don't see him for 3 weeks. Fergie wasn't really like that.
Yeah. The only maybe people worth pointing out that sometimes he did have a grudge. At the end, there was definitely a grudge with Roy Keane, and you would say potentially there was a grudge against Beckham, which the Beckham one certainly eased with the passage of time. I'm not sure the Keane one did.
Yeah, that's true as well. I think what you saw with Fergie really was the grudges only began against his own players when they were no longer useful to him. So he fell out with Keane when Keane was finished, more or less. He fell out with Beckham when he felt that the team needed to move on. He needed to refresh that midfield, and Beckham was the player he felt he could most do without. Ruud van Nistelrooy is another one. He fell out with Ruud van Nistelrooy when the team needed to move on. But it's interesting that of all the people he's fallen out with the exception of Roy Keane, the players have always come back to him. And there's always been some kind of rapprochement, and it seems like it's usually motivated by the players. So I think that when I talk about bearing grudges, I'm talking more on a day-to-day basis with people that are going to stay being at the club. Of course, Fergie has an amazing fury, I'm sure, and will always fall out with someone. But perhaps another distinction with Fergie is that he always felt like, in terms of those personnel issues, always did what was best for United, whereas Mourinho almost feels like sometimes he wants the team to get beaten so that it gives its confirmation bias against the players that he already didn't like. So against Brighton, after the Brighton game, he said, I told the players what was going to happen. It's like, well, if you're so good at predicting what was going to happen, why didn't you prevent it from happening? And also telling the players that they're going to lose. I mean, I can sort of understand why that is some kind of motivational tool, but if you thought that was going to happen, that just doesn't sound really right. And actually, were you giving players rope to hang themselves on the basis that you're playing a team that try and avoid relegation, so they're going to be giving everything. Your own team don't need the points in the league, and there's a cup final coming up. So it feels like he's saying, well, you go there, play badly, and then I'll be justified in not picking you for a few more weeks. It does sometimes feel that way with Mourinho.
Yeah, no, for sure. One last thing, just then, before we leave this and talk about tonight's game, the bit at it was Old Trafford where Wenger is there getting his kind of ceremonial goodbye, and Ferguson's gesturing to Mourinho. It felt like Manchester United finally made peace with the fact that they have this absolute iconic behemoth manager who is around the place and has a role to play, and he's still the boss. But actually, it was a benevolent level of post-dictatorship from Ferguson in a way that probably wasn't. You couldn't have said that relationship was comfortable when Moyes was there, or even when somebody as egotistical as Louis van Gaal was there.
Yeah, it's interesting, that Fergie situation, because it felt like when Moyes got the job without a single credential that made him suitable for the job. I mean, if you think about Fergie himself, he had to bash the old firm in Scotland and win a European trophy with Aberdeen to get the United job at a time when United weren't even any good. Whereas Moyes came nowhere near doing any of that stuff and got to take over the champions. It seemed like one of the subtexts was an opportunity for Fergie to retain control. I'm going to give the job to this guy who's going to be thankful for a job that he can't possibly have expected to get and must at some level know he hasn't deserved, so that Fergie would then get asked about things because there would be a gratefulness and a respect. That didn't really seem to happen. And obviously Van Gaal didn't ask either. And it also seems like Mourinho doesn't really ask, just because there are things that have happened under Mourinho that would never have happened under Fergie. Martial, for example, is a player that you think that Fergie would have found a way of working with and getting the most from. But what's happening now, what that sort of seemed a little bit like, was almost like Fergie saying to Mourinho, look, son, this is how you act like a mensch. I know you have fallen out with this person, but actually this is the way that we go about things. And one of the things about Fergie that was different to some of the other people that succeeded Matt Busby was Fergie loved the fact that Busby was there, just as an authority figure, someone to learn from, someone to respect. Whereas the people that came immediately after Busby, basically Franco Farrell was intimidated by Busby because Busby was involved in the selection process. He was still there, and the players still came to tell Busby, to sneak to Busby about what was going on. And you can see why when Moyes inherited Fergie's players, he might have felt that too. But it also said a lot about Fergie that he immediately embraced the fact that this football genius was there on tap for him, and he went to him and asked him questions because there were things to ask him. Whereas I'm not sure Mourinho either is so into that. I mean, he pays lip service to the genius of Fergie, which he even did when he was the Chelsea manager, and it felt a bit patronising at the beginning when Mourinho was winning and Fergie wasn't. But it seems odd that there's never been that kind of relationship. But at the same time, you understand why there isn't that relationship, because the manager has to be his own man rather than just kind of hectoring the person that was there before about times past. So it's difficult, but yeah, there are a lot of times when I've thought, I think you should ask Fergie about that one.
Yeah, well, hopefully he makes a full recovery and we get to see him back in the stands sooner rather than later. Got to talk to you about tonight in the Swansea-Southampton game. Southampton at the weekend were on the verge of safety. So you can take that two ways. There's a sense that, OK, we're actually good enough to be able to get out of this, or we're doomed because of the equaliser 6 minutes into stoppage time. It's a challenge for Mark Hughes to find the right tone, and if there was one of many criticisms that you could make of Mark Hughes, it was that I would never have suggested that he was like the best at rabble-rousing and the best at... he always seems a little bit pissed off with how life is going.
Yeah, it's that man. It seems like he has no conception whatsoever of happiness, Mark Hughes. One of my favourite interviews with Mark Hughes is United at home to Liverpool in 92-93. They're 2-0 down, and Hughes scores two brilliant goals to draw them back to 2-2. And then the interview afterwards, they ask him, and he says, yes, those are the kind of goals that I never score, aren't they? Like, just this most classically joyless interview after he's done something brilliant. It's on YouTube if anyone wants to have a look. But I think that this game I can't wait for this game, because this is really what football is about, where we're guaranteed almost some amazing misery at the end of it, juxtaposed against some amazing joy. And that is exactly what football is about. It brings us that kind of thing that it's acceptable to enjoy, whereas in ordinary life, we're generally not supposed to enjoy the immense misery of other people. I think with Southampton is that they know that they're much too good to be where they are. I mean, obviously they're not, because this is how many points they've got, so this is how many points they've earned, and this is how many points they deserve, but they've got a lot of quality, Southampton. If things had gone even half well this season, they'd be nowhere near where they are. They haven't scored enough goals, but they do have players that can score goals, that can make goals, and Swansea have lost, I think, 3 in a row. So I'd be pretty surprised if Southampton didn't find a way of getting out of this, because they've just got better players than Swansea in the end. And I think that hopefully what Hughes does have is righteous indignation, and he's enjoyed a lot of righteous indignation in some situations where he is not righteous, and he's also got no business being indignant. So I would imagine he should be able to engender some kind of mongrel behaviour in his players tonight. And in the end, you do want a manager to inspire the players, but these guys are elite professionals. Like, the amount they've had to sacrifice to get from where they began to where they are now tells you that they've got some mental strength and some pride, and I would expect them to deliver some sort of performance tonight.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned it there that they've completely underachieved this season, Southampton, potentially the Premier League's biggest underachievers in the context of this season alone. To what extent do you think that they are like Newcastle of a couple of seasons ago, where they're good enough to maintain the level of talent they have within the squad and go right back up to the Premier League next season, should they get relegated?
I guess all that would always depend on who the manager is, if it's Hughes or not, and who they're able to keep and the money that they're able to spend. Probably you would expect Southampton that would have enough infrastructure, enough money to be able to spend their way out of the Championship pretty quickly, because it seems like not everyone will leave, and players might decide to give them a year. So I would be surprised if Southampton weren't able to come back up, but I think I'd be quite surprised if Southampton went down. But I've been saying that for quite a long time now, and here we are, and they might go down.
Would you agree that the best result for the neutral tonight would be a draw, so that we can potentially see this great escape from West Brom? Because it strikes me that Darren Moore right now is the most likeable man in football.
And part of me thinks is that because we don't know him yet, but no, he does seem like a really sound guy. So yeah, it would be nice to see him, and away fans all over the country will want the Vine pub to stay in the Premier League, because the Vine pub is a Premier League pub. So there is that, but I think it comes back to that thing of, if it's a draw tonight, then that does take it to the last game of the season, which will be exciting. But I'm kind of dreaming about the looks on the faces at the end of the game tonight if we get a positive result, and the only way we're going to get that is if we get that positive result. So it would be nice, and I would happily see West Brom stay up ahead of Southampton, ahead of Swansea, because as you say, I like Darren Moore, and to get from where they were to where they are would be perhaps the greatest escape that we've ever seen. So it's a rare occasion, whereas fans of Premier League football, it's win-win, I think.
Daniel, great stuff. Enjoy the game tonight. Thanks a million.
All right, see you again. See you guys. Bye.
Daniel Hart gives us some thoughts ahead of that game tonight. Wigan's amazing escape. The first time, did they win their last 5 games of the season to escape?
I think so.
That's what's in my head. But
like the biggest one, obviously, but it's not the biggest one because of the personnel they had, was West Ham in 06-07, when they were 10 points doomed with 10 games to go, which was mathematically seemingly impossible. But obviously, with Tevez and Mascherano, do you really call that a great escape? I mean, coming from 10 points behind against whoever got relegated that season, I can't recall quite who it was that went down.
It was Neil Warnock's team, because he still bitches and whines about the fact that they shouldn't have been able to play.
Yeah. Yes, he does actually.
Which team was he in charge of at the time?
Sheffield United.
Was it Sheffield United? Yeah, it was.
So, yeah. So that was a huge escape. Obviously, Nigel Pearson and Leicester that season was a gigantic escape. Nobody thought that was happening. You get the similar feeling about West Brom a couple of weeks ago, that this is done. You may as well count them out of the picture and talk about the rest of the 5 teams there that may or may not go down. And here we are. And it will be an unbelievably...
Man United beat Spurs.
There you go. And in unbelievably dramatic fashion as well, that Livermore goal at the weekend. He's not even claiming it. He was so happy with the result. Just the way Everton completely screwed Southampton over at the weekend as well. That foul on Nathan Redmond was an absolute joke of a refereeing call. It seems that the stars are aligned in West Brom's favour, especially if tonight's a draw, because Southampton play Manchester City at the weekend. Swansea, I can't recall their fixture. It should be one that they'd be looking to get some sort of point out of. But West Brom have a winnable game as well. Manchester City is the only game this weekend where you start to think to yourself, right, that team who were in serious trouble might not be able to get all 3 points. But crazier things have happened. Crazier things have happened involving Manchester City alone on the last day of the season. And I'm just desperately hoping for a draw tonight. So we've got this incredible conclusion to the league. Stoke, well, there you go.
Stoke already relegated, but think
for pride.
And free to, you wouldn't, you've seen weird stuff like that. I'm just looking at West Brom's results. Awful up until, so in March, Watford beat them, Leicester hammered them, Bournemouth beat them, and Burnley beat them. And you're like, wow, this is a team of shithouses. Off you go. And then they draw with Swansea in the start of April, and they beat Man United, and they draw 2-2 with Liverpool, and then they beat Newcastle, and then they beat Spurs. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
I wonder, is there a sense, though, about Swansea and about West Brom that they're just simply not good enough to have that immediate bounce right back up in a way that Southampton have? They've clearly just got the players to be able to do it right away.
I don't think you can predict anymore with the amount of money that, like, so who's the new Wolves? Somebody decides that they're going to come in and spend $500 million on getting a team to the Premier League. It's like, I don't think any team is guaranteed to bounce straight back up anymore. Even the well-run clubs, like West Brom seemed like a well-run club. Swansea seemed like a pretty well-run club for the best part of the last decade. And Southampton, you would have said that how do you pronounce Lieber? Lieber, yeah. That family seemed to have a grip on things, and but then I don't know, they seemed to lose interest a little bit about 18 months ago. So
Yeah, crane-like grip on that club, as I say.
So Vincent Hogan was doing the pay-per-view with Richie at the weekend on Sunday, and with John Fogarty as well. Here he is talking about his own personal experience of getting the hairdryer treatment from Alex Ferguson.
You know, it's shocking to think just a few days ago he was presenting a vase to Arsene Wenger to mark Arsene Wenger's last trip to Old Trafford. And but yeah, I mean, this larger-than-life character, I think he won 38 trophies as United boss. And I had a couple of experiences with him, both sides of Ferguson. I remember covering a Champions League game against Barcelona good few years ago. And at the time, we had I think it was a World Cup qualifier against Northern Ireland coming up, and Roy Keane was carrying some kind of an injury.
This would have been the 93 kind of direction.
It was thereabouts, and Keane had already been ruled out of this World Cup qualifier because he was to have an operation. And I was at the press conference the day before they played Barcelona, in which Ferguson just happened to say they now didn't think Keane needed the operation. So I put up my hand and I said, eventually got my question, I said, does that mean he could be available for Ireland's World Cup qualifier? And he erupted, and he effed, and he blinded, and he said, here I am 24 hours out from a Barcelona match, and you were asking me about effing Ireland. And I could see all the senior English soccer writers, and they were sniggering. They thought this was so entertaining that this gobshite from Ireland had blundered into this. But a very interesting thing happened at the end. He left the press conference room and then doubled back and came to me and actually apologised to me for reacting the way he had, but that he was so wound up about it being Barcelona that that was his only focus. And I remember Henry Winter, who was working for the Telegraph at the time, said he'd never ever seen Ferguson do that. So there was that side to him, that he had a conscience, and he didn't like the way some of the senior writers had been sniggering at the way he treated me.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
That's a great story. I'd never heard that before. Like, to double back and apologise as a result of how somebody was, not that he bullied him, but that essentially the sniggering in the room was a form of bullying in itself, where they were like, this is hilarious, let's use this guy as a little piñata, the Irishman over here, thinking he's got his big shoes and all that.
I have a feeling that it's around that time that Barcelona killed them 4-0 as well, so maybe it was after that and this was the return fixture, but certainly that Barcelona team was still the bones of the dream team, and his Man United team were still suffering with the fact that you could only play a certain number of foreign players and a certain number of assimilated players. Any recollection of what an assimilated player is? Do you know that?
I've got a fair idea of what an assimilated player is. Is that kind of what the current definition of a homegrown player is, despite the fact that they weren't actually born in the United Kingdom?
Okay, fair play.
Acclimatised. So there you go, Ger.
But it is definitely, it doesn't exist anymore, really.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been like a lot of pre-match analysis would have been, well, which of the assimilated players? It's like James Lowe, Jameson Gibson Park, and Scott Fardy. Which of these Antipodeans are we allowed to play or not? So maybe that's why he was so wound up. But brilliant story from Vincent Hogan. You can get the full podcast available, of course, on iTunes or on offtheball.com, and of course the full papers is up for your delectation at offtheball.com/YouTube. You should hit subscribe to the Papers podcast as well if you don't already. It's a brilliant hour of radio every Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to chat Joey Carbery now, I think, because of course he's back in the headlines again. It's every single Leinster press conference at this point where you get some sort of quote about Joey Carbery. It is the hot potato at the moment. And it's a fair point that you make earlier on about the timing of this being really, really, really bad timing, especially given this kind of hurtling towards the climax of the season, that over the past couple of weeks, this is still clearly, as you've informed me, been a very hot piece of the agenda over here. So When you think about Joey Carbery, though, and you think about the potential of him going to Ulster, let's say he's an Ulster player right now, and he's playing every game. It's not just about the game time. Like, I presume I haven't missed John Cooney leaving Ulster.
No.
He's still there. So you've got John Cooney at 9. You've got a player who's clearly hungry for success. He's a player who's made vast improvements this season for an Ulster team that looked doomed at certain parts of the season. He was the only shining light at certain times of the year. He's learned from someone like Christian Lealo-Ufano this season. He's grown his game incrementally over the past couple of months. He's looking to learn. Joey Carbery's looking to learn. And you've got an unbelievably exciting half-back pairing right there. Like, is that not something that, as a neutral, we can be really excited about? Cooney and Carbery.
I mean, maybe.
Like, obviously, you've got your Leinster hat on right now.
Yeah.
Like, full stop. Like,
I've got my Leinster and I've got my tie hat on. It's like, like the whole point of growing the game in the province is that the kids in the tie don't want to play for Ulster. They don't, right? And nor should they. That shouldn't be part of their dreams.
But he will play for Leinster again.
Well, will he? Like, that's all bollocks. That's like, how do you know what's going to happen in the future? If he's an amazing success, Ulster are like, no, we want to keep you. If it doesn't work, it's like, well, Leinster are like, well, no, actually, another guy coming through here. Do you know, it's like, it's not really a win-win situation here if you think about it into the long term. I don't think. I think that, like, it's a weird, it's like introducing the cane toad to Australia. You've no clue what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Like, that's the potential for this to go horribly wrong.
To be fair, I might be saying something different. I'm not a Leinster fan. I'm not an Ulster fan. If this had involved...
If he wants to go, right? If he says, this is my best bet here for actually getting the number 10 jersey. But, like, nobody thinks that's realistic. So, I see Johnny Waterston drawing the comparison today with Robbie Henshaw moving. And it's like, oh, well, this works for Leinster. He's not saying that, but people have been saying, oh, it works for Leinster, it's grand when it's Robbie Henshaw. Robbie Henshaw wanted to leave. He wanted to go. It's not like he was kind of told, oh, you've got to go there because it's better for your international career. Like, Bundy is still playing away, and there's no block on anybody from Connacht playing for Ireland. I'd say you probably have to outperform Connacht, and you have to outperform the situation. You had to outperform your coaching situation last year. But, like, this is not a situation where he's knocking on the door going, I need game time. I want to go. I want to leave the most successful club in Ireland/Europe at the moment to go and play for Ulster. Now, if it's Munster coming and Munster make an offer and Munster make an approach and say, we have a European Cup winning setup here, we're just missing an out half, I think that's different. And, like, by all accounts, Munster are making phone calls saying, here, listen, we have an issue at 10.
But the other difference with the Robbie Henshaw thing is not just about what he wanted to do, it's also because he was joining a great province that has just moved past the Darcy and O'Driscoll era. I mean, you can't say that about Carbery right now when you've still got Johnny Sexton in his absolute pomp. If he wants to become a number 10, that will not happen in the near future at Leinster. It just won't. Will 15 happen for him in the near future at Leinster? To a certain extent, there's also a question mark over that. I mean, Carney's not going to be around for much longer, but he's still playing unbelievable rugby. You've got Jordan Larmour waiting to play. Of course, you can shunt him out to the wing if you want. You've got Ross Byrne in wait as well there. If Ross Byrne, how good is Ross Byrne? We don't know yet. He's got the potential to be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So the best thing from an Irish rugby perspective is for Joey Carbery to be playing at 10 for Ulster next season. But is
Munster. I mean, I think the Munster conversation should be happening. Like, Ulster obviously feel like they have a bargaining chip because the decision to cancel the contract of Jackson and Olding, they presumably feel like, well, the IRFU need to help them sort that out. So, I don't know. It's not the situation that we should be talking about in the build-up to the Champions Cup final. Stuart Lancaster was before the press yesterday, and he was obviously asked about this. Have a look. Here's the video.
Movement there. Are they going to leave or are they going to stay?
I don't know. If I'm being perfectly honest, I've not been privy to conversations. Obviously, they've been taking place with Leo and Ireland and Gaisby, etc. So, as far as I know, that Joey's preparing for a Champions Cup final, and that's the way it is because it's such a big week for us. So, I understand both sides of the story. I can see it from all points of view. I've been involved in these situations in England many times where you end up with a player and decision to make. And my belief has always been if you put the player at the centre and you do what's right for the player. How it plays out, I don't know, if I'm being honest, but it's certainly the furthest thing from our minds, and I'm sure Joey's mind this week. No. I mean, all the lads are 100% focused on this week. I mean, it's such a big week, in the context of a season. It's the goal that that every club team wants to aspire to is to get to a Champions Cup final and there'll be no distractions. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because these things inevitably come up towards the end of the season, which is when the big competitions are. But I come back to the point I made, that whenever I was in this position or involved in a player who had a decision to make, I always tried to say, right, what's going to be the right thing for the player? Not what's right for this party or that party, what's the right thing for the player? And as a consequence, I think Joey's developed brilliantly at Leinster, and I think this is where he should stay.
So you would like to see him stay at Leinster?
Yeah, obviously, because he's such a good player, he's a talented player. I think it's through no fault of anyone's that he hasn't played as much this year. He's been injured. But now's not the time for those conversations, certainly not in a week as big as this.
Yeah, and what about Ross Byrne then? And also Joey as well, do you get the sense that he would prefer to stay at Leinster?
I'm a bit involved in the discussions, to be honest, but I'm just talking about my experience back with England and back in England. If you put the player at centre, then you don't go far wrong.
What do you think?
But you see, putting the player at the centre here doesn't automatically support your argument, because we don't know what Joey Carbery wants as the end goal. We know in the short term he's made the sounds.
He sat in that seat and said he doesn't want to go.
That's what he says in the short term. But what does he want in the long term? Does he want to become the best out half in the Northern Hemisphere? I suspect he does. Yeah. I suspect he wants to start at number 10 for Ireland and win more Grand Slams for Ireland. I suspect he wants to start at number 10 for Leinster and win more Champions Cups after they inevitably win on Saturday this year. That's what he wants. How does he best achieve that? It's not by sitting around at Leinster for the next couple of years. It's not. If he wants the best chance, he might achieve it, but if he wants the best chance of achieving that, he needs to start at 10 now. He needs to be a starting out half right now.
It did Johnny Sexton absolutely no harm sitting behind Felipe Contepomi for a long period of time. He was 24 before he was getting his break. Joey Carbery is already miles ahead of where Johnny Sexton was at a comparative age.
Because that's a class complete. He's done the whole learning from somebody. That's that done. Maybe Johnny Sexton just took a little bit longer to absorb all the Felipe Contepomi lessons.
Not done. It's not. It absolutely isn't done. Like, he's not the finished player. He's not the finished article. He hasn't fully learned how to run games. He hasn't learned how to win matches that the team are losing and performing badly in a way that Johnny Sexton can do. There's still a massive, significant gap between them. And closing that gap, playing behind a pack that is going to go backwards in an environment where you're not entirely sure whether or not the head coach is actually going to be there. Like, Ulster do not have their ducks in a row. If this was Munster who were making this play, you'd be like, all right, that Munster team is ready to go. They're locked and loaded. The one thing they're missing is a world-class 10. Off you go. But to go to Ulster at this point in Ulster's history, I think it's absolutely the wrong move for him. Now, if it was Munster, I think you can make a case for, okay, this is a team who will properly be competing, who has a pack that if they add another second row and maybe another prop, will actually be able to dominate across Europe. But they are not doing that at the moment in Ulster. They're not a team who can actually qualify from the Pro 14. They couldn't get to the playoffs. Like, they have to have a playoff to qualify for the Champions Cup. This is not a team who is 1-10 away from being competitive, and I just think that
doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
It does.
What does that matter to Joey Carbery that his team... Why can't Joey Carbery step up to the mantle and say, listen, I'm going to learn what it's like to be a number 10 when our pack is terrible. I'm not going to learn as much from a team where Johnny Sexton is holding my hand. He's telling me what to do in training. He might even be giving me... He'll be giving me my high five as I come onto the pitch.
I think that's a mischaracterisation. I think that also, that clearly, as the rest of that press conference spoke about, the Bowden Barrett comparison where he can play 15 as well, where actually, if you take the number of games that Sexton is rested and the number of games that Kearney is rested, there's going to be 1,000 games.
And how big are those games?
Well, plenty big. Champions Cup games. Like, he will play Champions Cup games next season at 10 or 15. Also,
like 2 of them.
Also, Johnny Sexton's injury record is not amazing. He's actually had the best year in, I would say, about 4 or 5 years in terms of injuries when it comes to representing Ireland / Leinster. That does not happen. This is not a stereotypical Johnny Sexton year.
Joey Carbery will not learn as much playing against Newport Gwent Dragons, the Dragons, next season, as he will playing the Interpro derbies for Ulster or for Munster. There is no question about that.
For Munster, I accept it. We have a different argument.
Sure.
I think it's a completely different argument.
I think it's game time.
Is Carbery that good at 10? Willie Casey says, has Byrne not come up to be number 2?
Fair point.
Well, we don't know, because here's the thing. He was injured for most of the season when he would have been getting game time. Like, there's a possibility that he would have done absolutely sensational things around those Christmas fixtures in particular, but he just didn't get the opportunity to do it. So, again, let's wait and see what it's like when he has a proper full season as the second choice number 10, second choice number 15.
And we'll have the exact same argument in 12 months' time.
Yeah, at which point we all know Joy Carbery's really, really good and ready to go.
In the week of when Leinster are about to win their second Champions Cup on the trot, and they've trounced everybody in Europe, and we've got
that's not a bad situation.
It's a great situation, and he will learn from that. Don't get me wrong, he will still learn at Leinster. He will learn more from being the starting number 10.
We'll see. Here's let's move on, because an amazing story at the weekend coming from Gaelic Park in New York, where obviously we spent a happy night. Here is
what?
Sounded a bit dodgy. Here's one of New York GAA's native New Yorkers, Shane Hogan, speaking with Alan O'Mara ahead of the Leitrim clash.
And going back to that Roscommon game that you referenced 2 years ago, obviously that was ultimately you lost out by a point on that day, and as you said, there was that feeling of, have we left that one behind us? But I mean, there's a number of the players that would have played that day are still here, yourself being one of those. That must have been quite a steep, quite a harsh lesson to kind of step away from, and I suppose, did that challenge you to kind of come back hungrier, or did it knock you in any way? What was the kind of reaction to that overall?
We thought that we could only just build from that experience. You get so close to beating a team like that, and then you could see with all the write-ups for last year's game before the Sligo that we were confident, we were excited, we were ready to go. It's not. I'd say it probably woke up the teams in Ireland a bit more now that come out here, because usually, like especially when I first started, they saw New York as just this is just a game. You got a bit of a vacation, go out, have some fun. But now they have to take it that bit extra serious, because you don't want to be that team now that drops it.
The chance, Leitrim are coming third. It's just a moment. A goal for Leitrim. It's blocked. The sides are level. Shane Quinn has put the ball over the bar, and we're all square at 1:15 to 18 points, and we have 40 seconds to play. 1:15 to 18 points. The sides are level, and we go to Park Sean. Referees indicating there's 1 minute. Is there a winner? Is there a loser in Gaelic Park? Who's going to win the kick-out? Who has the confidence? A long one out to the centre. Breaking ball. Leitrim haven't won back. Can Leitrim win it by a point? On the 50-yard line. They're coming. McGovern has it. Inside to the substitute. This could win it for Leitrim. It's kicked in. Leitrim leads. Leitrim have taken the lead in Gaelic Park in New York.
And that was it. That was New York's Dance with Destiny. 3 points up in injury time. You're thinking, no, they might be able to do this. But actually, perhaps the superior conditioning of a team that's just come through a league campaign sees them over the line.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what it is. I would have... Okay, that's an amazing game and it deserved a winner. We could easily have been sitting here after a draw, after extra time, saying to ourselves, the GAA have made a complete mess of this. New York now need to fly to Leitrim to fulfil a replay. Like, what the hell was that about? Like, Donncha Boyle had it yesterday in his piece. He tweeted about it as well on Saturday. The fact that this game was going to a replay were there not to be a winner from Leitrim on Saturday or on Sunday night. That is insane. But anyway, we're not having that conversation because we did have a winner, and it's going to be hard pressed. We're going to be hard pressed to find a game that lives up to that sort of excitement near the end of the summer. And it completely supports this whole idea of like, oh, the lesser teams, don't you dare kick us out of the championship. How can you have moments like that? And it's like, well, you have a moment like that because you're playing a team on a similar level to yourself, and potentially you could have more of those sort of moments later in the summer were there to be a different sort of championship structure, because that could be, that's it now for Leitrim. Like, Roscommon are a Division 1 team. Like, I could be completely wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong, and I hope it's a tight game, but there is every chance that humongously massive moment for Leitrim GAA might kind of fade into a little bit of irrelevance over the next couple of weeks. Not that it is irrelevant, it's a huge championship win for them on foreign soil. 5% of the population of Leitrim are there. So in a microcosm, it's a huge thing. But my point is, we're going to get a lot of these amazing wins from lesser counties over the course of the summer, and ultimately in a competitive sense, how important are they? Without I hate to be a dick about it, like immediately in the immediate aftermath of the game, but...
Too late. Tell me, what does this mean for New York? Should they have more games in the championship?
Without question, I think. I mean, is it too much of an ask to put them into the National League? I mean, what would we have
expensive,
to do?
yeah.
Too expensive. So they would have to play a couple of games, maybe within a week, maybe get 3 games, do a week-long trip to Ireland and get a weekend, midweek, weekend trio of games.
Yeah.
It would be brilliant, but chances are it's going to snow again and none of the games will happen. It'd just be classic, look, what is the backup plan?
Okay, Willie Hegarty is on the line, fresh off the plane from New York to Shannon. Willie, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, lads. We're doing good. We're doing good. We're still adjusting to the time zone, lads. So bear with me, please.
I'd say you're jet lagged to hell. Tell us a little bit about the environment, the occasion, and just how close it was.
Well, I mean, how close it was. I mean, Leitrim were within 4 minutes of becoming the first Connacht team to be beaten by New York in the championship in extra time with 4 minutes left. New York were 3 points up and had the tiger by the tail. And as the famous Republic of Ireland manager Giovanni Trapattoni once said, you know, the cat's in the bag, but it wasn't. The cat came out of the bag, and Leitrim got through by the skin of their teeth in an extraordinary contest. And you know, people will say that the real GA Championship starts next weekend or this coming Sunday. Galway Mayo in Elwood McHale Park. The All-Ireland final, September the 2nd. This game will be a distant memory. It'll be, you know, like yesterday's fish and chips. It'll be in the bin, but it shouldn't be. I mean, you know, it was just an extraordinary event. It was one I was privileged and delighted to be at. And it summed up, I think, what the GA is all about. 4,500, 5,000 people packed into Gaelic Park. Some people even turned away at the gate. And 2 teams just went at it hammer and tongs. And you had New York looking to create history, and you had Leitrim trying to avoid history for the wrong reasons. And what we got was a really, really intriguing, you know, a wrestle arm of a contest that, you know, went almost 100 minutes.
Willie, is this the best New York team you've seen in the Connacht Championship?
I've been over 5 times. I've seen, yeah, they've had some good teams in the past. Probably individual players of good ability, but I think collectively, and I think they would have earmarked this one from the last 6 or 7 months as the potential banana skin for the team that was coming out. So I think in that reason, I think if New York were playing Galway and Mayo last Sunday, I don't think some of the players who are playing for New York would probably have put as much effort into it as they did. They've seen this as their opportunity, and in fairness, you know, other years they would have fallen with a furlong to go. Their tongues would be out, and they'd have given 60 brave minutes, and they'd have fallen by the sword. But you know, they kept going, they kept plugging away, but then you have to admire Leitrim, a young Leitrim team. 3 or 4 times were on their knees, gasping for breath, and they, you know, I mean, 4 points in the last 3 minutes of injury time in extra time summed up that they didn't want to get beaten either. But yeah, I mean, New York had 4 or 5 footballers that would be chasing down any team outside the top 3 or 4 in the country. You could put Jamie Clark into a top 3 or 4 team in the country, but outside of that 4 or 5 other players that would definitely make any inter-county team outside the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, Willie, we were all listening on the app to your commentary on Shannon's side at the weekend. It sounded like you were having an absolute ball doing it. Just to labour the point one more time on the quality of the team. Neil Collins, Ross Common, fullback, was playing. Jamie Clark was obviously playing. Tom Caniff was playing. There was a bunch of other lads as well who had played inter-county at that level. It seems certainly that you've got more serious footballers going out who are actually still in the meat of their inter-county career, who are heading to New York now for opportunity as much as anything to go out and see there, and are happy to commit to the New York team at least for the 5 or 6 months in the build-up to this game.
Absolutely, and also Vinnie Cadden, the Sligo goalkeeper, he's been there for the last 2 or 3 years. You mentioned Tom Caniff there, but also one other player that deserves enormous mention is the All-American, Shane Hogan. I really was impressed by this lad. Midfielder, terrific athlete. He's been playing Gaelic football in New York since 4 or 5 years of age, and it just showed what can be done. Kevin O'Grady from Wexford as well. I'm not sure how the Wexford management team got any hold of this laddie, but I'll tell you one thing: he kicked 5 great scores from play. So yeah, it just seems that they're they're getting more. I suppose that they're doing things different, and their preparation is probably better. Over the last couple of years, players are willing to commit. When you see someone like Jamie Clark and Neil Collins, left the Roscommon panel over a year ago for work commitments, went to New York and, bought into it. So definitely the calibre of player going over is of a higher quality, and it's about finding enough of those in a particular year. They're not going to beat a Galway or a Mayo. And, 2 years ago, they lost by a point to Roscommon. So I suppose they will target certain teams coming out that they feel that they might have the opportunity to win it. And, they were very, very unfortunate even not to get the draw on Sunday, which would have meant, a historic replay in Carrick and Shannon on Saturday evening.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane Hogan there, who's been a very interesting facet of this New York team, because when you think about all the emigration towards New York over the past couple of decades from Ireland, you would have expected there to be more second-generation Irish actually playing for this New York team. But in actual fact, what happens is they play at underage level and they become very, very good athletes, and they will always choose the sport that has the college scholarship for them. Like, I'm not sure how many conversations about that particular subject you've had over the past couple of days, Willie, but wouldn't it be amazing if there was some sort of college opportunity for young GAA players in New York, and how unbelievably talented an inter-county New York team could then become?
Absolutely, but they are putting in a really serious, huge effort. There was a under-19, under-20 development squad game between all-American players that are GAA born and bred and reared in America GAA there before the match. And, looking at them, there's 4 or 5 of them there that certainly I think will push on for the New York senior team. So there is that pathway there that they're trying to develop. The All-American footballer into it. And, Shane Hogan has decided that, really, really wants to be a good Gaelic footballer. Has been there for the last 2 or 3 years on the New York team. And, he has just developed into a serious footballer. And I suppose from the New York point of view, that I suppose he can become the role model for other players that are staying loyal to the game of Gaelic football, and they're putting in a massive effort out there. And it showed on Sunday. With 10 minutes to go, the chant of New York, round the ground. It would have been unheard of 5-10 years ago. But they had Leitrim brought around 1,500 people to New York on Sunday, and New York themselves had a huge support. So it just showed that what's happening out there, and it also added greatly to the occasion on Sunday. A packed Gaelic Park, a game that went extra time. Never more than a kick of a ball between them over the 100 minutes, and both sets of supporters, up and down and pendulum swinging, and both sidelines, having two teams that were going full blooded for the victory. So it's like I said at the beginning, it's a game that will be forgotten about, which is unfortunate for the two teams involved, because they give savage entertainment to everybody that witnessed the battle on Sunday.
What if they had won, Willie? What would have happened then? What would the next round have been? Would the next round have been in New York as well?
Next round they'd be in Hyde Park on the Saturday the 26th of May playing Roscommon.
That's it. That's it.
That's it.
So they go straight in. There's no. They don't automatically have home games if they'd won.
No. They have their home game in the Connacht Championship against the teams that come out. But then if they beat any of the Connacht teams, their next game is on Connacht soil. So, but it would have been tough on them. Would say if the match had finished level on Sunday, they were. They would be in Carrick and Shannon next Saturday evening, and if they'd won that game, if they'd won the replay, we'll say they would have to come back again to play Roscommon. So look, that's the nature of the beast. But no, if they happen to win a game in Connacht, their next game would be in Connacht.
Can I ask you about Leitrim for a moment, Willie? Because we were just saying before you came on the line there, 5% of the population of Leitrim were in the Bronx at the weekend, which is absolutely incredible. You've mentioned it yourself. It is a shame that this game is not going to be remembered come August, September time, because this is going to be one of the highlights of the summer. When you look at Leitrim, they've obviously had some big wins in the league, getting huge wins against Limerick and against Wicklow, but then suffering badly against Carlow and Antrim. And I'm wondering to which extent, which end of the spectrum were we looking at when it came to Leitrim on Sunday night? Was it the team that were winning those big games in Division 4, or was it the teams that were getting trashed by Carlow and Antrim? Because Roscommon coming up, people are giving them a little bit of a chance, if even just a small one.
Yeah, I suppose on Sunday night the great thing for Leitrim was relief. They came out under a lot of pressure, in fairness to them. A young team, and Billy Guckeen, the manager, in fairness to him, has stood by them, and he has just got a young team together. And I was talking to them after the game on Sunday evening, and a lovely young group of players. But we were also saying that it would have been absolutely devastating for them, a young team, if they were to be remembered as the first Connacht team to lose to New York. To carry that baggage around with them, it would. I think it would absolutely have floored Leitrim football. But I suppose, in fairness, their opening 2 or 3 league matches were against the 3 best teams in Division 4. Laois shouldn't be in Division 4. I mean, to me, that was ridiculous. But look Derry are in it next year. So that's what happens to certain teams. So Laois are a Division 2 top 2 or 3 in Division 3 team. Kerr have made massive strides over the last 18 months. So them 2 were the obvious choices to come out of Division 4 this year. Leitrim would have been looking as the next 2 or 3 teams in line of that. They didn't play Waterford or London because of the weather, because of the beast from the east, and that them games were never played. So it's quite possibly they could have ended up with 4 or 5 wins in the league, and they improved as the league went on. They're a young team. Imla Mulligan is the father figure of the team, and look, this was their All-Ireland final on Sunday. There's no 2 ways about it. They can go into the Roscommon game now. They have Roscommon at home. Nobody will expect them to win it or even put up a challenge. But to see the reaction and to see their supporters and the goodwill and the hugs and the kisses and what it meant to Leitrim on Sunday to win that game, because if they had lost, they were coming back to a funeral home, coming back to a wake. They'd never get over. So they're a young team. They're a very, very young side, and this will give them a real boost because Dublin, Mayo, Kerry, Tyrone, Galway, they'll get the glamour from July, August on. But these lads, would have trained from last October, last November, left work early trained in the morning for this game, and put in the same type of effort. And to see them get the reward on Sunday, they won't get too many more rewards before the champion summer is out. But they got the reward on Sunday, and they'll go into the Roscommon game now with the belief of having won a championship match, which will stand to them. They're facing, a big test against Roscommon, which nobody will expect them to win.
Willie, great stuff. You're going viral at the moment. Enjoy it. Thanks a million.
You're very welcome, lads.
Willie Hegarty there talking to us after an epic struggle in Gaelic Park. It's the last one at Gaelic Park. Of course, Gaelic Park's been torn down and then it'll be rebuilt. So the new Gaelic Park, which I presume they'll call Gaelic Park 2 or something. Or just keep the name. Maybe keep the name, or maybe get a huge sponsor. Yeah. It's like the Emirates Park. And then, as I mentioned there with Willie Hegarty, this pipe dream that maybe some sort of educational money might be put into the promotion of the Gaelic Games. Very unlikely. It is a pipe dream. But, Fly Emirates have got plenty of money once they name it Emirates Park in the Bronx. Yeah. And they can, sponsor some sort of college course in, I don't know, Villanova or somewhere, or Notre Dame or somewhere. I don't know. Columbia. Close. Yeah, okay. Harlem's not that far. But that's what it needs. One little GAA scholarship, if that was ever possible, it's probably never going to happen, but if it ever did, then New York could actually become a behemoth of the Connacht Championship. We were asking about whether or not they should join the league. No, it's not necessary at all, but if you move them around provinces, that would make it interesting, as well as balancing provinces between the ridiculous differences of 5 and 12 teams. We all know none of this will ever happen, like New York in the league. Hashtag OTB AM. Thanks for the comment, Darren. Good shout, actually, moving them around provinces. Yeah. Because there is a case where Connacht gets very, very strong. I mean, it is almost a lottery. I wonder, is there a seeding system that we could bring in here? Because the only reason we had the drama every year, or Sligo every year, whoever the lowest ranked team in the league is. But of course, ranking teams by league position is something we've talked about so much that it is definitely never, ever going to happen. But the only reason, as Willie said himself there, it was such a classic on Sunday evening was because it was Leitrim. You had it with Sligo last year, a lot of drama up until about 60-65 minutes. If that was Mayo or Galway, I know Mayo had a history of kind of approaching a banana skin when they go outside of Ireland in the past, and they traditionally don't get up for May in recent years. But seriously though, they need to be playing Leitrim. June, July. Exactly. The lowest ranked team going to New York would actually be a novel and interesting move. Yeah, that'd be great. It would be, and also then every year they'd have a chance of winning. And the fans, because their team is... So the lowest ranked team, the 32nd team in the league every year.
or whatever, if they want to keep
Whatever
them in Connacht because you need more games in that province because it's the smallest one, just the lowest ranked team in Connacht. Because what you will also have, like Mayo are going to have a lot of great days out this summer between the Super 8s and Croke Park. At least Leitrim have had their great weekend away in New York. Granted, Mayo fans may say to themselves...
Do you think they don't want... Do you think really that it's too much of a headache for them if New York win? It's like, oh, bollocks.
Maybe that's it. Like, I'm sure it is a headache. Like, if they had actually drawn the game after extra time on Sunday... Like, it would have just been face-palm central.
Can I have the week off work to play Gaelic football? Like, what?
Seriously, if I was the referee on Sunday and that game ended a draw after extra time, I would be on the phone
Here, lads, 10 more minutes.
to the GAA right now. Like,
let's all play 10 more minutes here.
Exactly. Yeah. Just common sense, if it could prevail once. But thankfully, common sense was not required on Sunday.
All right, so Ronnie O Sullivan obviously didn't win snooker, but was in the commentary box at the weekend. He's a pretty interesting commentator, actually. Our man Sheahan was over at the Crucible, and it was an amazing end to the World Snooker Championships, by the way. They had their oldest champion since Ray Reardon won it, and the two lads in the final, both in their 40s, which means that the chances of Ronnie winning again are actually increased more than likely by what happened this week as opposed to anything else. So here he is talking, here's Ronnie Sullivan talking about his ambition to be the Floyd Mayweather of world snooker.
One of the other changes he's brought about is the naming and shaming of slower players.
Yeah.
Now, this won't affect you, obviously, with 16.92 seconds per shot type time frame, but do you think that's possible? Stephen Hendry says it's not going to be something that's going to be very easy to implement, but do you think it's possible to implement punishment of slower players in snooker?
They can do what they like, can't they? I mean, they make the rules up. They sort of can, and if you don't abide by the rules, they said what they said is a yellow card, and then they're going to fine them. Yeah, listen, that's just how it is on the tour. It's run like that. But that's why I choose to sort of run my own career. I like the way Floyd Mayweather does it. He goes, well, it's my show, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And the idea for me to go and do other stuff was to free myself from that. So as I just come to play snooker for fun, I'm not one of these people that wants to be like you feel like a prison inmate sometimes on the tour, where they kind of have you under strict orders. I prefer to go like down the Mayweather route, which is do my own exhibitions, do my own tours, and do my work in China. Obviously, get involved in other industries, like health and fitness is massive for me. So for me, they can bring in whatever they like, really, and they have to do what they have to do to try and get the games where they want to get it. But I don't really, I don't do rules too well. So I try and sort of make it my life in a way where I have my own rules and my own boss, and I just pitch up and hit a few balls. And because I'm not one to, I'm definitely not one. I'm not a follower. A lot of the players on the circuit, they'll just take whatever's given to them and just accept it, and that's cool if you can do that. But I just know that's not in my makeup, so I have to kind of run my own show, and then I can make the snooker part of it bearable, if you like.
He's pretty amazing, isn't he?
He's not a follower; he is the Messiah. So he's obviously going to become the next Barry Hearn, right? He's going to take over the sport and make sure that we're not watching two old men playing the World Championships of snooker on a bank holiday Monday night.
It was brilliant, though.
It was.
It was like two people and have kind of a sense of, okay, yeah, I want this guy to win. Not sure I want that guy to win. And it was much better than Peter Ebdon's won that. There have been times when you've been like, oh my God, this is Peter Ebdon, another snooker.
Yeah.
He could have cleaned that up, but he's gone for snooker instead.
I was having this conversation with a few of my mates yesterday about Mark Williams against Ken Doherty in 2003, and I hate to do this whole thing again where it's like, oh, look how young I am, but there's not a load of events from 2003 that we remember in great clarity. I remember in great clarity watching Kerry get torn apart by Tyrone in 2003. I remember in great clarity Ken Doherty versus Mark Williams. There's not a whole pile else in 2003 I remember with great clarity. And
how old are you?
It was, I'm 23. It was...
How old are you then?
9. So, I know, sorry, I apologise for that, but I am making a point here that it is this uber element of nostalgia about snooker when you look at this game last night and you're like, I feel comfortable watching this. There's no part of me that feels cold. I feel very warm right now watching this. This is what snooker should be. It should be old people making us feel nostalgic about the past.
Yeah, what was surprising to me ever was that you deteriorate as snooker as you get older. It's not like your physical prowess diminishes.
No.
If anything, your brain should be getting better at it. Like, You're
more
keeping
tired.
You're keeping your brain work. But what tired? What level of fatigue? You know, just do a little bit of activity.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean mental fatigue. As in, I've been playing this game for 20 years.
You get bored of it.
Get bored of it, exactly.
That's all. It's just boredom. It's not mental. It's not like, I can't. I've seen this before. I know it's going to happen. He's going to do that. I'm going to do this. They should become chess grandmasters at like getting better and better. And it never happens. Everybody like just immediately got crap when they hit like 35. It was like, I'm out of here, man.
For sure. And you can keep training your brain into doing new things, like that shot last night when Mark Williams closes his eyes at the pocket of black, I think. And of course, Mark Williams had said during the whole process that if he won, because he's so old, that he would do his press conference naked. And so he did. I think we can show you the video now of him walking, using a towel to protect his modesty into his press conference.
A lot of tats.
A lot of ink on Mark Williams' body. And there he is, followed through on his promise, made good of it. And
I'm pretty surprised. Mick Foley from the Sunday Times was like, didn't expect to see naked Mark Williams. Also didn't expect to see him quite as painted as he is.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I'd noticed it previously, but naturally...
You'd noticed his naked body previously?
Well, no, I'd noticed a tattoo either like up here or on his arm, or I can't remember where, but it's not exactly a sport where you win the World Championships and you start flinging your shirt around. So this is the first time we got to see Mark Williams' back, and his back is covered in tattoos. So that's another thing we've learned from the weekend. We learned a lot of things at the weekend, and Mark Williams being a tattoo fan.
Brian Little, I once got to see him topless in the old Setanta studios. He was like whipping off his shirt, and he had like a giant Jesus Christ on the cross. In the same one as David Beckham, but obviously like much older.
Yeah.
That was the first time I was like, wow, Brian Little, the Aston Villa manager of my youth, has a big Jesus Christ crucifix tattoo. That was the most surprised I was ever about anybody. And like, I'm not that surprised at Mark Williams. I'm surprised at the level of them. It's like, you know, he didn't just get like a little kind of thing. There's not a little bit of Chinese writing there. It's like, that's a lot of time on the chair.
Yeah, on the chair. That's exactly where you do get a tattoo. Were you not tempted to get a crucifix yourself on your chest after you saw your hero Brian Little with a big crucifix on his chest?
No, I'm not really a crucifix kind of guy, you know.
But a tattoo kind of guy, and a Brian Little kind of guy.
Each man kills the thing he loves. I don't really understand that. It's all bollocks to me.
Yeah, but I guess, why should we be surprised? I mean, snooker is the most gangster sport out there, right? That's I expect if anybody else in snooker did a topless press conference, we'd see lots of ink.
What do you reckon Ken Doherty has going on?
I would say what do you think his favourite album is?
I know, it's a Man United / Dubs reference.
Yeah, well, that's one of them. That's on the shoulder. But Above His Heart is probably his favourite music album, I suspect. Which I don't know what that is.
A reminder that OTB AM is brought to you this morning with Air, the home of Air Sport. You can get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. That was one of the other things you missed. The Pro 14 going to be exclusively on air next season.
I caught that actually on one of the two occasions I scrolled through a sports website to actually see what was going on. It's an interesting development. It's
one of the Welsh newspapers floated over the weekend that the rest of the South African teams are being slowly sucked out of the Super Rugby. And it makes more sense. It was always on the cards that there was going to be a play for them. How soon it might happen, I guess, is the other.
It is strange timing, isn't it? Like, when you want to see how something's going to work out, after one season seems remarkably quick for the Pro 14 to turn around and say, this is definitely going well. Because it hasn't.
Well, it's gone really well if you look at
the figures.
And so,
but in terms of support,
it's a business.
It's a business.
Is the business profitable? Is it growing? Yes, the business is profitable and growing. It's successful.
But does it not diminish the realistic future profits of the business if you see that this isn't actually being consumed by the people on the ground? Or maybe South Africans are actually watching the Pro 14 in droves at home and are just not paying to actually go to the matches. I doubt that's the case somehow.
Well, there's two teams. One team it's worked for and the other team it hasn't worked for. If you bring the best South African teams in, then...
Oh, it's a game changer, no question.
And I think and the money has doubled in terms of the TV rights. So suddenly it's not like impossible to run these teams and break even. Or maybe, who knows, at some point make some money in the future.
Well, the thing is, there has only been one logistical nightmare in the first season of this, which was the very first trip down there when Leinster forget to kind of sort out the visas here and there. And after that one little hiccup, everything's fine.
There was a 26-hour travel for Cardiff, I think.
Oh, was there?
One of the teams had a bit of an issue.
But you also look at the positives of this, and CJ Stander getting to play in front of his hometown was a pretty good moment. You wouldn't have got that elsewhere. It is the Pro 14 embracing the fact that there are a lot of people outside of Europe who play rugby, namely in South Africa. We have more than CJ Stander in the Pro 14 that are from South Africa. We can have more of these great homecoming matches and spread the word of the Pro 14 around a great rugby nation like South Africa. So I can see the positives of it for sure. My point is just the timing of it. I think we needed another season to potentially see some sort of growth in the Southern Kings or in Cheetahs, and then maybe say, right, this thing is going to get bigger and better. Let's welcome some more in.
And so just for clarity's sake, it was a flyer by the Welsh newspaper as opposed to this is definitely happening next season and the offer has been made and this is how the deal would look like. But you can be sure that those conversations are happening, of course, in South African rugby. Arsene Wenger did a press conference at the moment. Wenger confirms he has had other offers to manage elsewhere, more than I expected. I want to work well until the last day of my contract and then I will think about it. I will be active. My brain demands work. John Cross. Wenger says he's had more offers than he expected.
Right, okay. So he's obviously thinking to himself that his stock is at an all-time low. Oh, was there a part of him when he walked onto the Emirates actually on Sunday and started applauding the fans? That he didn't applaud as hard as he could because he was like, screw you, screw you, screw you, screw you, screw you. You were the very person holding the Wenger out sign. You're the guy from Arsenal Fan TV and you're the guy who watches Arsenal Fan TV. Screw you all hate me. I'm going to give this speech now and get the hell out of here. And get revenge maybe. Where does he go?
What do you think? Is he... He's been driven out. He doesn't want to go. So that all emerged, possibly while you were away as well, that the timing of it wasn't his. There was one day in particular where he was he did a press conference I didn't want to announce it. I didn't really want to go. This isn't my timing. And then 3 hours later, a very official Arsene Wenger, suddenly sounding like a puppet for the club, goes, the club came to the correct decision and I fully support whatever decision they've made and now I'm all in favour of it. Yay.
So what could happen is Unai Emery leaves PSG, which I think is happening anyway. So Wenger takes over at PSG. Would PSG take that risk? Does he go back to Monaco potentially?
Thomas Tuchel has that gig, is the word on the street.
Okay. So not Monaco then. Bordeaux?
No, Thomas Tuchel has the PSG gig.
Okay.
So potentially Monaco.
Go back to Monaco, go to Bordeaux. I don't know what the club would be, but then eventually take over as France national team manager in 2 years' time.
Or after the World Cup.
Whatever it may be, this brand of kid that they have right now is one of the best young teams in world football.
Yeah.
Certainly do a lot worse than Arsene Wenger as your international team manager, given there's no such thing as a transfer market.
Well, Pogba would actually be great in a Wenger team.
You would like to think so. I wouldn't put my house on it, but he might be...
Pogba, Martial, that's a good team.
It is a good team. I think the France national team job is where Arsene Wenger needs to end up if he is to have this fantastic swan song in his career, because there is potential there. I think club football and Arsene Wenger aren't great partners.
Well, unless he's going to spend a load of money, which is also a possibility, that he decides now it's it's not my money, I don't have to pay for this crappy stadium.
Yeah, but where does he go to actually get that sort of funding where he can actually buy a league? PSG is one of the only options. None of the other top clubs in Europe are going to take him. And PSG are taking him based on his Frenchness.
Right. I think he's got a bit more credit in the bank. Okay, so LeBron James, obviously the Cleveland Cavaliers, you might want to talk to us a little bit about how sensational it was to be in America during a time when the debate about LeBron actually being, finally we can have this conversation, him or MJ, and now it's people are thinking it was a stupid conversation, not so stupid anymore.
But I wasn't in Cleveland or Miami, so I think the general consensus is that everybody hates LeBron, who isn't from those cities, because they're in this state of humongous jealousy about him. It's kind of like how everybody who's not from Dublin still views this Dublin team with a huge eye of jealousy, and it's only in decades to come that you will properly appreciate how great this player is. And previously you would say to yourself, the conversation isn't worth having. This year, it's the first time LeBron James has played 82 regular season games, every single match of the regular season, despite his aging body at the age of 33. He's playing unbelievable basketball. He's had an unbelievable playoff series, as we all know. The discussion is real. If he wins the championship this year, which he probably won't, but if he does, I think it becomes a realistic debate, not just a debate, but a realistic argument that he is better than Michael Jordan. I think he is better than Michael Jordan. Granted, I wasn't around, I was around in the 90s, but I wasn't old enough to appreciate Michael Jordan. I might not have been old enough to stay up late and watch the Chicago Bulls in that era, but from what I've seen, from what I've been able to see, if LeBron James had Scottie Pippen on his team right now, which would, in the current NBA landscape, the biggest comparison I can make is somebody like Kawhi Leonard from the San Antonio Spurs playing alongside LeBron James. He would definitely have 2 more titles in his locker. He wouldn't have as many as Michael Jordan, but he'd have 2 more, I reckon.
Somebody did a picture of Jordan being guarded by a bunch of scrawny white guys, and they juxtaposed it alongside LeBron being marked by some of the best opponents that the game has ever had. I was like, well, no wonder everybody thinks Jordan was a superstar. Look who's guarding him. But obviously Jordan has an amazing career, and it's one of these reductive arguments that we ended up with for so long about Messi against Ronaldo, when actually the right thing to do is to appreciate that what LeBron is doing is absolutely sensational and might be without parallel given the team that he's playing on. And so you should hold him up as a player who has been able to do this in a way that no other player has been able to do it.
For sure, and I think we have to have the same attitude towards the Golden State Warriors. I mean, ultimately it's going to be Warriors against Rockets in the West Coast Finals, and if anybody out there is looking for one of the great sporting events of this year, it's probably going to be the Western Conference Finals, because that is going to be a series and a half, and we need to appreciate this Golden State team for what it is at the moment.
How good are the Rockets, just to explain, because I think people probably have a fair idea how good the Golden State Warriors have been over the last 3 or 4 years, but just how good are the Rockets that they're actually able to put it up to them?
Well, Rockets were the best team in the regular season this year. They had an unbelievable regular season, number 1 seed in the West. They're possibly the best shooting team in the league that we've seen. They've got James Harden and Chris Paul as their backcourt, which is arguably the best backcourt in the NBA right now.
What does the backcourt do?
Essentially your guards. It's essentially your point guard and your shooting guard. They're brilliant shooters. They've also, like, just from what I've watched over the last couple of days, they've got somebody like Clint Capella, one of their big guys, playing sensational basketball at the moment. Eric Gordon playing sensational basketball at the moment. They've got a team to beat, the Golden State Warriors, but it's going to be a very boring conclusion. I'm calling it now. Golden State Warriors are going to beat Houston Rockets in 5 games in the West and beat Cleveland Cavaliers by 5 games in the NBA Finals. But my point is, we need to appreciate Golden State as well. Just like we want to appreciate LeBron, we need to appreciate this great team at the moment, because they're absolutely outstanding.
Steph Curry's been out for about 4 weeks, but came back last week and 14 seconds in, drained his first 3, and everyone's like, he's back. Was he as good as he always was?
Yeah, and he's on course to becoming possibly the best shooter in the history of the NBA. He's already scored the 4th most 3-pointers in NBA playoffs history. I think he's just lurking behind Ray Allen at the moment, or potentially he's just passed him out. So it's something we need to appreciate as well. As I say though, if LeBron manages to win this championship and beat Golden State in the finals, it is better than anything Michael Jordan ever did with the Chicago Bulls, because of the teammates that he had, in particular in Scottie Pippen, because he took a lot of the weight off his back in terms of defence.
The Hamptons 5, do you know this? The Golden State Warriors, they had like a... so when they were trying to convince Kevin Durant to come, they like went to the Hamptons. I'm sure it was, a nice house.
That's what they do. It was kind of an epic week, probably the most epic week.
Did they go on the piss? Was it like or are they... Is that the type of thing they do? Do they sit down and play Sudoku? How do these guys hang out?
I'm not sure what they do. I think there was some sort of pictures of him like chilling by the pool when his phone was still there and he still hadn't rang Russell Westbrook to say, listen mate, I've left your team and I've gone. And Westbrook ends up finding out via, I don't know, one of the NBA beat writers that Durant has actually gone. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's the Hamptons 5. It is the kind of sitting around a lounge in a posh part of the country.
So the Golden State Warriors sent 4 of their top men over to the Hamptons to seduce Kevin Durant to come and join.
Because he was there at the time, speaking to other teams.
Okay.
There was talk, he's in the Hamptons. Is Jay-Z sitting down with him? Is he going to join the Brooklyn Nets? There was talks that the Celtics might actually be able to pick him up. There was talks, I think, of Miami at a point. And everybody had kind of thought at one stage, right, he's on the East Coast, there's no way he's going to Golden State. Anyway, that'd be boring. It'd become the greatest basketball team in history. And everybody hated him for a while. Then he did a series of interviews, and everybody loves Kevin Durant now, I think.
And so last night, or what are we at, Tuesday, they played on Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday night.
That was the first time that the Hamptons 5 had started as a 5-some. The first time that they obviously played together all season, but never started because they played without a point guard. Does that make sense? Or without?
Yeah, they would have done, yeah. They might have played without number 5 as well for a while when JaVale McGee was injured. I'm trying to think.
Power forward?
Could have been, well, Durant would be their power forward. They could have.
There you go. Half read, half remembered in the middle of the night. But the Hamptons 5 sounded like something that was worth getting into. We might do a bit more on that. The other thing that happened, obviously, in terms of American-Irish sport, a big weekend for Irish lads in New York, because the Mets have an Irish guy. Great first inning from Colin. I hope this gets some coverage on Sports Talk tomorrow. Well, Kieran, welcome to Sports Talk with your host, Michael Sport.
Good morning, Michael Sport. Yeah, PJ Conlon is this Irish guy.
Heard about this thing, climate change. So tell us about this.
He's a Belfast-born guy playing with the Mets. had, I wouldn't say a dream debut last night because he's probably going to play again for a while. I'll get into that in just a moment, but basically his parents moved from Belfast to Southern California when he was just 2 years old because of the Troubles, and he grew up there.
No better reason to leave Belfast, I say.
No better reason. There are many reasons to leave Belfast, but that's probably the number one reason on TripAdvisor for leaving Belfast. So PJ Conlon grows up to be a prodigious baseball player, great pitcher, left-hander, as far as I'm aware. He is left-hander, that picture would suggest so. And did really well yesterday, I think. He retired 7 of the first 8 batters on the Cincinnati team last night. Then the next batter up scored a home run. But second time around, they had a little bit more success against Conlon. Got a little bit of an injury when he was batting, like he hit a 1 and they managed to get himself home.
What's a 1?
Where you get to the first base. I presume that's what you call it. And he managed to get himself home eventually. But I think he injured himself while batting, so he's a bit of a doubt. And also, I'm not quite sure how the series is going, but the Mets want to bring in a different sort of pitcher for the next couple of games. So he's going to be put back to their D-League team or their what's called mini-league team.
Farm system, yeah.
Yeah, for the next couple of games. So we're not going to see him for a couple of days anyway, but it's certainly been a hugely positive
minor league.
Minor league, of course. What am I talking about? What do they call it? Baby league?
Mini leagues.
Mini leagues, Jesus Christ.
Mini leagues are like the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's like, he was drafted in the 13th round. So I guess nobody gets drafted in the 13th round really expecting to make it.
I don't think so, no. Like that's a huge kind of development for him. I think he was drafted 2 years ago. And he's the first man since World War II to be born in Ireland to play in the MLB. I was looking at it earlier on. He's the 48th Irish person to play in Major League Baseball. Of course, in the early 20th century, there was a lot more Irish people in... the college system hadn't fully developed, and the kind of socioeconomic factors wouldn't have been as limiting to you as they might be now. So the 48th Irishman to play in the MLB. The last one was Joe Cleary from Cork, who I think he made 1 pitch for the Washington Senators in 1945. He was pretty bad, but there's a quiz question for you right there. Joe Cleary from Cork, the last man before PJ Conlon from Ireland, who was born in Ireland to play Major League Baseball.
The lads obviously live tweet the show at Off the Ball or at Off the Ball AM, and one of the tweets earlier on, people are thinking the conversation is not so stupid anymore. Basketball fire emoji. We're discussing LeBron's growing claim as basketball's all-time great. Do you think he surpassed MJ? Farmer Jones.
Oh shit!
Raise his hand.
He knows a bit more than I do.
Raise his hand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he thinks. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Farmer.
I can't believe Farmer's awake because it's like 4 in the morning.
Yeah, nobody stays up till 4 in the morning in the United States.
Unless he's actually in this part of the world. But good morning to you, Ryan. Hope you're well. He's been tweeting the picture of the cover story that they did at Slam magazine. He wrote the first ever book on LeBron James back when James was still a teenager, so has obviously followed his career very closely. And obviously LeBron still has all his hair, but it's like ready to reign King James. It's like, yes, he was. That was one of those, like, oh, this guy's going to be really good. Mm-hmm. And then he turned out to be actually just as good as he was supposed to be.
A big tip for you is don't go to the States during the start of the playoffs, go near the end, because it becomes an addiction of sorts. And I'm going to be coming in with sunken eyes and bags under my eyes.
Just get up early, go to bed early, get up early.
Could do that for the 3:30 games.
Yeah. So what time are they on?
Well, the West Coast games, the late ones, would always be 3:30 a.m.
They start at 3:30?
Yeah, so tonight there's a game on at 3:30, for example.
So you're up at 4:30 anyway, right?
5, yeah.
Reading the papers, getting ready for this.
There you go. No Champions League as well, nothing to stay up for.
We don't just lick this stuff off a stone. Right, that's pretty much all we've got time for on the show this morning. Are there anything else, any other bits and pieces that we wanted to talk about? Did you miss anything else? What did you miss most about being in Ireland for 3 weeks?
Well, as soon as I went, there was a heat wave, was there? There was a heat wave like 2 weeks ago?
Was there? Was there like a day?
I think so. And
we just had one for the last 2 days. You came back. When did you get back?
Perfect time. We got back Saturday.
Yeah, so you got Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They were literally, summer's over. Driving to work this morning, red sky everywhere. You're like, oh shit. And actually, you could see the clouds just slowly clamping in, and the rain started to fall just as I arrived. I was like, oh.
Yeah, the sky looked like the scene in Independence Day where the world was about to end. So I'm looking forward to the weather over the next couple of days. It's good to be back.
We're off to Ballyliffin, which is host of the Irish Open this year, heading up to play the course tomorrow. And I was looking at the weather app, and the rain is tumultuous all morning, just as we're supposed to get in the course. So
wouldn't be Ballyliffin without it.
But for our art, we will persist, and you're going to be hosting tomorrow alongside
Dave McIntyre.
who will no doubt be very happy about the fact that he's not at Ballyliffin, but at least it's going to be raining, so he can rub that in. So that's pretty much all we've got time for on the show this morning. I hope you enjoyed it as ever. If you want to get involved in the conversations that we've been having, and we'd love to hear from you, you can follow us on Twitter at OffTheBallAM is the specific Twitter handle for the show. Make sure you turn on your subscriptions and live notifications for that, and any time that we go live, you'll get us youtube.com/offtheball as well. The radio show is on the radio tonight on News Talk from 7 o'clock. Loads more on our social feeds across the day to keep you tuned to what's going on in the world of sport and what we have coming up on the show tonight. But until tomorrow, we'll see you. Good luck.
OTB AM.
In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.